Okay. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay. So can I just have the chanting posted up on the screen?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, thank you.
Bhante, can you see the chanting document?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fifth one up from the second column. Fifth one, yeah, from the bottom up.
Vaishali, could I try from my side?
Bhante, can you see the document?
Yeah, if you go to the second column, it's the fifth one from the bottom. It says text. Here we go.
Sorry, Bhante.
It's okay. These things happen. Okay, as Vaishali gets ready. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again. So this period is going to be dedicated to reciting some verses in the Pali language. So of course, we don't expect everyone to be perfect Pali reciters or with perfect pronunciation, but I still strongly encourage everyone to give it a try. Don't worry, no one's going to be able to hear you on our end. Everyone's muted. But yeah, so please join along with me. To begin, you can put your hands up in Anjali as a sign of respect for the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and we'll begin. So we'll start with Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, homage to the Buddha. Iti piso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Vijacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro puresa dhamma sarati satta deva manusanam putto bhagavati. Namo tassa samma sambuddhassa ye cha buddha tita cha ye cha buddha nagata pachupanna cha ye buddha aham vandami sabada nati me saranang anyam Putto me saranang varam etena sacha vajena hotu me jaya mangalam uttamangena vandeham padapang suvaruttamam buddheyo kalito doso Butto kamatutang mamam Bhuttang yavanibana pariyantang saranang gacchami. Homage to the Dhamma. Swakato bhagavata dhammo sanditthiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayiko Pachattang veditabo vinyuhiti. Namo tassa niyanikasa dhammasa. Ye cha dhamma tita cha ye cha dhamma anagata. Pachupanna cha ye dhamma. Ahang vandami sabada Nati me saranang anyang Dhammo me saranang varam Etena sacha vajena Hotu me jaya mangalam Uttamangena vandeham Dhammancha dividang varam Dhammeyo kalito doso Dhammo kamatutang mamam Dhammang yavanibana pariyantang Saranang gacchami. Okay, homage to the Sangha. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sango Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sango Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sango Samichipatipanno bhagavato savaka sango Yadidang chattari purisa yugani atta purisa pugala esa bhagavato savaka sango ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anuttarang punyaketang lokasati. Namo tassa atta arya pugala mahasangasa ye cha sangha tita cha ye cha sangha anagata pachupanna cha ye sangha ahang vandami sabada nati me saranang anyang Sango me saranang varam etena sacha vajena hotu me jaya mangalam uttamangena vandeham sangham cha duviduttamam sangheyo kalito doso sango kamatu tang mamam sangang yavanibana pariyantang saranang gacchami. Okay, homage to the three symbols. Vandami chetiyang sabbang sabbatani supatititang saririka dhatu mahabodhim buddharupang sakalang sada imaya dhammanudhamma patipattiya buddhang pujemi. Imaya dhammanudhamma patipattiya dhammang pujemi. Imaya dhammanudhamma patipattiya sanghang pujemi. Okay, so I guess we're going to the Karaniya Metta Sutta. There we go. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa karaniyam attakusalena yantang santang padang abhisamecha saku ujuja sujuja suvacho chassa mudvanantimani santu sakocha suvarocha appakicho cha salahukavutti sandindriyo cha nipakocha appagabbo kulesu anugiddu nacha kudang samachari kinchi yena vinyu pare upavadeyo sukino wa kemino hontu sabbe satta bhavantu sukitatta ye kichipana bhuttati tasawa tarava anavasesa digawa ye mahantava majjima rasaka nukatula tittava ye va additta ye chadure vasanti avidure Uttava sambhave seva sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata naparo parang nikubeta natti manyeta katanchinang kanchi Viyaro sana patega sanya nyanya manya sadukka micheya mata yata niyang putang ayusa ekaputang anurake evam pisa babhutesu manasang bhavare aparimanam metancha sabbalokasmin manasang bhavare aparimanam udang ado chatirihancha asabbadang averang asapatang Titancharan nisinova sayanova yavatassa vigadamiddu etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahu titinchanu bhagama silava dasanena sampanno kame suvineyagedang nahi jatu gabbaseyang Punaretiti etena sachavajena sotute hotu sabadam etena sachavajena sabarogo vinasatu Etena sachavajena hotu te jaya mangalam. Okay, the blessing verses. Sabityo vivajantu sabarogo vinasatu mate bhavantantarayo sukhi digayuko bhava bhavatu sabha mangalang rakantu sabha devata sabha buddha nubhavena sada soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabha mangalang rakantu sabha devata sabha dhamma nubhavena sada soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabha mangalang rakantu sabha devata sabha sangha nubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Okay, I think that's it for now, actually. I think we'll do the sharing of merits afterwards. Okay, so that ends the Pali recital for this period. So let's get into our meditation practice. We're going to 7, right? Ivan?
Yes, Bhante.
We're going to 7 o'clock, right?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, very good.
Bhante, it is 6:50.
Just 6, that's right. Okay, sounds good. That sounds about right. Okay.
Sorry.
So you get into your meditation posture, your position. Just remember to take your time, grounding your mind into the body. Just letting go of all your thoughts from the rest of the day. Any questions or plans you might have for after the session, for after the discussion. So also remember, this isn't a war, this isn't a battle. We tend to gain a lot more from our meditation practice. We have a sense of openness and accepting things. If you're sitting, thoughts keep on coming up. You do more harm to your practice if you take it as, why is this not working? What am I doing wrong? Why can't I keep my mind still? If we constantly come from that angle in our meditation practice, it's just adding more insult to injury. We won't get very far. But if we learn to stop with that reactivity, to suspended for a little period of time, we gain a little bit more peace, gain a little bit more calm. Just to acknowledge these thoughts, to acknowledge this is the nature of the mind. We just let it go. Let it fall away on its own accord. If we have any discomfort or pain in the body, if you give it space to grow, to change, instead of clamping down on it, to want it to be something other than what it is. We're just adding more frustration, more pain, more anxiety to it. It just gets all the more worse. But if we watch, observe it, we learn something, we develop something. So try to develop this sense of softness, this sense of openness in our practice, to be an observer, to be a watcher. If we learn to observe and watch, we can learn how to see things, see their commonality, see how they arise, they stay for a while and pass away. All these things, whether it be physical or mental or whatever, there's this common thread, this commonality of change, change, change. Everything's moving, everything's changing. We tend to miss out on that when we're adding our own stories, our own perceptions, our own views about things. So if we take our time, be patient, be kind to ourselves, all that extra commentary, all that extra coloration doesn't have time to blossom, doesn't have time to infiltrate. Everything else gets dropped, and the real realities come to the forefront. The passing show, the illusions just come up, stay, pass away. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're sitting in your practice. Let's take a few moments to cultivate our thoughts of loving kindness. We'll begin with ourselves, directing our thoughts of love and kindness, wishing ourselves to be well, happy, peaceful, all those good thoughts, all those kind thoughts, all those compassionate thoughts. Letting them fill our mind, letting them fill our heart. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. Just wishing good things for ourselves. When you feel ready, that you've generated enough thoughts of love and kindness towards yourself, fill yourself up with it. Extend it outwards to all beings in all the directions, radiating that thoughts, radiating that feeling of metta outwards. Just as we wish ourselves these good thoughts, these good feelings of love and kindness, may all beings in all the directions take part in this. May they have all those thoughts of love and kindness. May they all be well. May they all be happy. May they all be peaceful. No matter who they are, where they are, what they've done, what they've not done. May they all have these good things. When you're ready, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. And as always, you can rub your palms together and get them nice and toasty. So a nice forehead massage, temple massage, top of the head, back of the head, down the back of your neck, shoulder blades and shoulders, upper back, lower back, down to your buttocks, your thighs, your knees, calves and your shins, down to your feet. So I think that'll do it for us. So thank you everybody for participating and continue on with the discussions with Bhante. So I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Bhante.
And thank you.
Okay, we'll wait. Okay, good evening, everybody. And so we're ready to resume our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And our focus in the afternoon and this evening will be on the first noble truth. So let me share the screen. Okay, so in the afternoon, we went through the different constituents of the first noble truth, which you could see that I distinguished the different aspects of dukkha into the three categories of physical suffering, psychological suffering, and then what we might call existential dukkha. The dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness inherent in the five constituents of experience, which the Buddha calls the five aggregates that form the objective range of clinging. Now, to understand the full range and depth of the first noble truth, we have to look at this exposition of the first noble truth against the broader background of the Buddha's teaching. And if we fail to bring in that broader background, then I would say we get a rather narrow and limited understanding of the first noble truth. And very often, I would have to say, in popular presentations of Buddhism today, that broader, comprehensive background to the first noble truth or the four noble truths is not presented. It's sort of kept out of the picture. And therefore, we wind up with what I would call a psychological interpretation of the Four Noble Truths, rather than what we might call the cosmic interpretation, which in my view is what was intended by the Buddha. To bring in this broader background picture to the Four Noble Truths, let me go to some supplementary texts. Yeah, and so we want to begin here with the first two knowledges that the Buddha attained on the night of his enlightenment. Because these two, when you take these two in conjunction, it helps to sketch out that picture. So last night, I just presented these two knowledges very concisely, but now let's look at them in greater depth or greater detail. So here the Buddha says, during the first watch of the night, he says, I recollected my many past lives. That is, he went back 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, even 40, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000, many aeons of world contraction, many aeons of world expansion, many aeons of world contraction and expansion. So in these phrases, we see the basic Buddhist picture of the cosmos or the universe is going through alternating stages of contraction or dissolution, and then stages of expansion and development. And so without any beginning in time, the universe, or perhaps the solar or galaxies, have been going through these alternating processes of expansion and contraction within which sentient life takes place. And in recollecting these past lives, the Buddha would recollect his name, his clan, his appearance, the food he ate, his experience of pleasure and pain, the length of his life, how he passed away, where he was reborn after that, and so on, over and over. So in this way, he recollected in their particulars and their details his many past lives. So what lies behind this recollection is the fact that the Buddha teaches not as just a speculative theory, not just to conform with the dominant Hindu view of the period, but based on his own cognitive experience, his own recollection. He was able to see his many past births, to see that he has undergone, like all other beings, has undergone this process of repeated existence or rebirth. Then the second knowledge is the knowledge that comes with the divine eye, in which he extends his vision outwards. The first knowledge, he directs the vision inward towards his own past lives. But here he directs his vision outward to survey the world with this Diva Chakku, the divine eye, and with which he sees beings passing away and taking rebirth. And he sees how beings take rebirth under different conditions in different states, inferior and superior, fair, some are ugly, some are fortunate, others are unfortunate. And then he understands how living beings move on from life to life in accordance with their actions. And the word translated action here is their karma. So he sees that those beings who behave badly by body, speech, and mind after death get reborn in the bad states of existence, the bad destinations, while those who behave well in body, speech, and mind at death with the breakup of the body are reborn in good or fortunate destinations, even in the heavenly world. So in this way, with these two knowledges, the Buddha gained a perspective on the panoramic dimensions of sentient existence, seeing not only his individual destiny from life to life, but how all other sentient beings are caught up in this elaborate network of cause and effect, karma and its fruits, caught in this process of repeated existence, moving on from life to life in accordance with this law, this kind of moral law that lies behind our actions and ensures that our morally significant actions, for bad or for good, lead to the appropriate realms of rebirth. And so on this basis, the Buddha could say that here we have a number of suttas that are collected together. These come In the Samyutta Nikaya, in chapter 15, is called the chapter on beginningless samsara. So here he says that this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point cannot be perceived of sentient beings roaming and wandering on from life to life, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. So this gives, when we bring into view this perspective on samsara, the beginningless nature of the round of rebirths, we can see that all the different forms of dukkha that are enumerated in the account of the first noble truth don't occur just one time and then at death they're all finished, but rather they go on over and over again, so that birth leads to development, to growth. Then at a certain maximum point of vitality, the life force starts to decline, leading into old age and death is followed by a new birth, and the process starts again. And this is what is called samsara. And the word samsara is not in any way a mystical concept, but it comes from a verb, sangsarati, which the stem of the verb sarati means to run or to wander. And it has a prefix sam, which sort of intensifies it. So it means a continuous or repeated wandering. And so that process by which we roam and wander on, that is what is called samsara. So literally, samsara is the process of wandering on through the cycle of rebirths. Sometimes we even meet in the text the expression jati samsara, the wandering on in births, in repeated births. And what lies behind this repeating process is ignorance and craving. Then to illustrate the extent of this samsara, the Buddha uses a number of similes. So he says, suppose a man would cut up all of the grass and sticks in Jambudipa, that is India, collect them into a heap, and then count each one. This is my mother, this is my mother's mother, and he can trace this process down through grandmother, great-grandmother, and so on. Maybe in the case of earthly existence, going all the ways back to the one-celled organisms, but still he would not come to an end. And yet the grass and sticks would come to an end because the samsara is without discoverable beginning. And because of this, he says, as we've roamed and wandered through this long journey of samsara, the stream of tears that we have shed is more than the water in the four great oceans. For a long time, he says, you've experienced the death of your mother, your father, brother, sister, son, and daughter. And I would add husband and wife, the death of friends, teachers, students, all who are dear and near to ourselves. So many times we've experienced their death. We've wept and wailed, shedding tears. And if we collect all of these tears, he says, through this beginningless samsara, the water is more than the water in the four great oceans. Another illustration that he uses is that of the heap of bones. So he says that one person roaming and wandering even through one aeon would leave behind a heap of bones as large as Mount Vepula. Mount Vepula, this is a mountain outside of the city of Rajagaha. Yeah, I saw it 2 years ago when I was in India. At least I saw the sign pointing in the direction of Mount Vepula. So for what reason, how is it possible that one is left behind, even in one aeon, such a heap of bones? Because the samsara is without discoverable beginning. And to illustrate the duration, the length of an aeon, again, the Buddha uses another simile. He says, suppose there was a great mountain made a solid mass of rock, and at the end of every 100 years, a man would come by and stroke it just once with a piece of fine cloth. So when he strokes it, it might wear away just a few fragments of the stone, maybe molecules of the stone. But he says that great stone mountain might in this way be worn away, but still the aeon would not have come to an end. Such is the length of an aeon, and of such aeons we've wandered through so many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of aeons. And how is that possible? Because the samsara is without discoverable beginning. Actually, I have to say, I think here the Buddha is exaggerating, because it seems to me that if one were to stroke a mountain of solid rock with a piece of fine cloth once in 100 years, one would really never wear it away. It would always remain. But in any way, it's a simile just intended to illustrate the length of an aeon. So perhaps if we were to use modern cosmology, and I'm not a physicist, not an astrophysicist, but I believe the current, according to astrophysicists, the Big Bang, which began the current cosmic cycle, according to contemporary cosmology, took place sometime like 13 billion years ago. And perhaps it will continue. The universe started to expand just from the explosion from an infinitesimal point, starting to expand very rapidly until from that expansion of pure energy, solid matter starts to take shape. Then in time, the stars emerge, and from the stars, planets emerge, and the energy breaks up into different galaxies, and the expansion will take place maybe for another 13, 15 billion years until the stage of dissolution takes place. So in modern times, that would be the duration of an aeon. And according to I've seen some cosmological thinkers speak as though the universe started from scratch with the Big Bang 13 billion years ago. But according to the Buddha's teaching, the Big Bang would have not been the first beginning of the universe, but just the beginning of this present cosmic cycle. But the Big Bang would have emerged out of the debris of a previous cosmic cycle in which everything had been reduced to virtual nothingness, and then in a very intense, probably a very intense concentration of energy built up, which culminated in the Big Bang, which began the present cosmic cycle. Okay, so we don't have to be concerned here with the details of the Buddha's cosmology, But the main point is that this process of, just like a human being or a living being goes through a repeating cycles of birth, growth, aging, and death, followed by new birth, growth, aging, and death, so the cosmos itself, the world system, goes through this repeating process of arising, growth, dissolution, and destruction, followed by new arising, development, dissolution, and destruction. And as we pass from life to life within this beginningless cosmic process, over and over, we go through birth, old age, illness, and death. And again, we will be united with what is displeasing, separated from what's pleasing and agreeable. Again and again, we will have desires which are not fulfilled, so that the failure to get what we want is dukkha, or suffering. And as we go from life to life, each birth is the act of acquiring, picking up the 5 aggregates, and death is the act of laying down, dropping the 5 aggregates. But through the force of our ignorance, craving, and karma, at death we drop the present set of aggregates, but then we pick up a new set of 5 aggregates, which becomes our identity in the new existence. So to appreciate the full meaning of the First Noble Truth, we shouldn't just focus on the single life. To focus on just the suffering in a single life, it's like looking at one wave and saying that wave is all that we have to be concerned with to understand the ocean. But if we really want to understand the ocean, we have to look at the entire ocean and see all of these waves rising, reaching a peak, falling away, followed by new waves. And so here we are looking out at this cosmic ocean of samsara, this ever-repeating cycle of birth, old age, and death. And it's within that framework that we're to understand the full comprehensive range and depth of the First Noble Truth. Okay, this will be my presentation for this evening. And now I wanted to devote the rest of this period to any questions that could have arisen in the course of the teachings this day. And if Jerry is on the line, Jerry in California, I told him that I would take his question first, question left over from the afternoon. So if you want to raise your hand and then pose your question. Okay, I see his hand appear. Okay, now you unmute.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. And I, more than anything, appreciate your kindness. I went back and found the recording on YouTube and listened to it a couple times. And so I think for now, it's good enough for me for now. The idea that there's dukkha without necessarily being suffering is something that, I need to sit with for a while.
Yeah, that's exactly the point that I was making in the earlier session, that we shouldn't interpret dukkha, even though we translate as suffering, because that's become the standard translation. And at least when people encounter Buddhism, it makes an impact, because a lot of people have some form of suffering, even if it's very subtle and not so overwhelming, but there's some kind of underlying discontent, dissatisfaction. So when they read, okay, the Buddha teaches suffering and its cessation. So they wonder, what is this about? But if we get to use some maybe more accurate translation, like unsatisfactoriness, what is that? You don't know what he's talking about. Or leave it, some suggest leaving dukkha untranslated, then it seems just like a rather strange esoteric Eastern religion with all of the words preserved in some Asian language. So I use suffering for dukkha, but dukkha, as I explained, suffering is only part of the meaning, but the broader meaning is this, what I call the intrinsic deficiency or unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. Okay, so let's move on now to then some
Thank
other
you.
questions. Okay, so this is Lim Kim Hung.
Yeah, thank you, Bante. My question is, when you mentioned about the first knowledge of Buddha during the first watch, where he's able to recollect so many past life through many
Yeah.
eons in minute detail. But the thing is, during that brief period, how is it possible that he can, go through so long eons of life recollect? Just a curiosity. Yeah.
It's a good question. And what I would just have to say, and this is speculative, that probably his faculty, because of the power of the samadhi and because of his previous, I mean, he would have been practicing over many, many lives, developing the skill. So probably the faculty of knowledge is able to move very, very quickly. That would be my guess.
Okay. That's
But the
good.
question, it never really comes up in the text. It's just something that's assumed happens.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, John Long.
Yeah, thank you, Bande. Thank you so much for the presentation. The very, very compelling Samsara story. I have a question regarding to the your presentation in the afternoon about the mimic you give us for the 5 khandhas, especially about the perception part, also the chitta, the consciousness. The mimic is I think a magician creates some illusion, right?
Yeah.
So you also mentioned the chitta is just a mere aware or recognize. Seems like it's very neutral. I find it hard to relate to that mimic. Can you help me to understand that? Simile.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the problem.
I mean, the consciousness is purely for recognition, right?
I would say that recognition is probably the function of perception or sanya. Yeah, in fact, that's what is said in the commentaries. So the way I understand the relationship between vijnana, which is what we translate as consciousness, and sanya, perception.
Okay.
Now, I have to say that the texts themselves don't offer a lot of what I would call a convincing clarification of the difference between vijnana and sanya, between consciousness and perception. So I have to use my own sort of reflection to try to understand the difference between them. And I think an important clue to the difference between them is that perception in another sutta, which I didn't quote, in a sutta perception is distinguished by way of its object. And so we have 6 types of perception, and the 6 types of perception are perception of visible forms, perception of sounds, perception of odors, then taste, then tactile sensations, and perception of mental objects. Whereas vijnana, or consciousness, is distinguished by way of the sense faculty through which it arises. So we have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and so on, through mind consciousness. So this suggests to me that vijnana is just the bare awareness, well, I call it the light of awareness, arising through the sense faculty and illuminating, so to speak, lighting up, making available the objective domain that corresponds to that type of consciousness, so that eye consciousness makes accessible the visible world, the world of visible forms. Ear consciousness makes accessible, it opens up the domain of sounds. Body consciousness opens up the domain of tactile sensations. And so consciousness opens up these domains, but sanya, or perception, is what focuses in on the particular objects that appear and then distinguishes these objects by way of their distinctive characteristics. And then sanya, or perception, draws upon labels and designations in order to designate, to name the objects of experience and to form a meaningful, organized system of classifications, categories, designations. So that, just to take colors, for example, a simple example, so that it's sanya, which is able to distinguish the different shades of blue, different shades of red, different shades of green, and so on. Whereas vijnana, consciousness, is just that which makes available to me the world of colors, the domain of colors. But vijnana itself doesn't identify the colors. That is the work of sanya. That's the way I understand the relationship between them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also, so the sanya somehow are distorted, twisted somehow. That's why we cannot see the true nature of things. Or
Yeah, that's exactly true. That's one of the most important things that the Buddha accentuates in his teaching, that perception is vulnerable to distortion. Actually, vijnana too, consciousness too, is subject to distortion. But it starts with a distortion that enters into perception. And so the perception gets distorted through the working of the defilements, so that we discern things in the way that's contrary to reality. Then because of the distortions in perception, then we reflect upon them and contemplate them and think about them in distorted ways. And then based on these distortions in our thinking, then we arrive at distorted views.
okay, thank you.
Okay, we have to move on to take some of the other people with questions. Okay, you could lower the hand. And now we have come to Chi.
Bhante, when you talk about the stock passages of Buddha's seeing his own life, and then his own lives, and other beings' life, and then his realization, I forgot whether I read it from you or heard from you or someone else that this stock passages is not always like this throughout the text. So I just want to double check with you. Meaning there might be places that don't have this view of his own life and maybe other beings' lives before his own realization.
Well, the attainment of the threefold knowledge, this is what I would call the standard description of the enlightenment. But even last night, when I went through the background to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, I pointed out that there was a passage in another sutta, this is in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 26, which doesn't speak about the threefold knowledge, but it's much more concise. Actually, we have several different presentations on the enlightenment. So this other sutta speaks about the enlightenment simply as he says, here I just put it up on screen, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeking the unborn nibbana, I attained the unborn supreme security from bondage nibbana, and so on. And then the knowledge arose in me, my liberation is unshakable. So in this passage, we don't have the threefold knowledge, but it doesn't mean that the threefold knowledge didn't take place. It's just that for the purpose of this sutta, the Buddha is presenting in a different way. And then in the other sutta, which I just mentioned but didn't go through, we find the enlightenment explained by way of the discovery of dependent origination in forward order and reverse order. Again, no mention of the threefold knowledge, but it doesn't mean that that didn't occur. It's just a different way of looking at the enlightenment experience.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but the version that occurs most often in the Pali Suttas is the attainment by way of the threefold knowledge. Okay, so we move on to the next question. This is Rajesh.
Yes, Bhante. I just want a clarification on the word samsara.
Yeah.
Because in different Indian traditions, it has slightly different meanings. And you described it as wandering on.
Yeah.
But then you also said it is the process of wandering on, which kind of implies that there are other qualities. It's not just the verb of wandering on, but there are other qualities which are associated with that process. And I was just wondering if you could clarify that.
Okay, let us just say that samsara is the continuous process of birth, at the continuous process of birth and death, with death followed by new birth, and then birth followed by growth, decline, and death, followed by new birth, growth, decline, and death. So we could say that samsara is the process of repeated rebirth. And it's derived from a verb which means wandering on. But what is meant by wandering on is the repeated process of rebirth.
Okay, thank you.
The round of rebirth. And so even the Chinese translate it as, shang se, so birth and death.
Okay, thank you. Then I have one more quick question.
Okay.
So when the Lord Buddha describes the fact that he saw the universe collapsing and then re-emerging, and he kind of remembered that. So that by implication means that there's some unique consciousness that continues even with the destruction of the universe. And I kind of found that curious. And I was wondering if there's anything you can say about that, or I know it's not really, it's really asking for a comment on that.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Right.
But one could just come up with speculation that maybe with the destruction of one cosmic cycle, the different streams of consciousness go into a state of temporary suspension until the universe, the world system starts to develop to a sufficient degree for the streams of consciousness to resume the process of repeated birth and death. That would just be my conjecture.
Yeah, thank you so much.
But it's pure speculation on my part.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Anne Fong, you should unmute.
Let Bante. Bante, which sutra where the Buddha actually talk about samsara process is impermanent? And does that mean when it ends for one person, it's end for another person too? Or it's a collective law?
Okay, so you're asking when one person puts an end to samsara,
Yeah.
does it mean that other people put an end to samsara too?
Yeah, and because I read somewhere that samsara is impermanent, and I just wonder which sutta where the Buddha talk about samsara being impermanent.
No, samsara itself is not impermanent. Samsara goes on and on and on, but everything within samsara is impermanent. So all of our lives within samsara are impermanent. Where, as I said, we're born, we grow old, we grow up, we grow old, and we die. Then we move on to the new existence. So our lives are impermanent, but samsara itself goes on, continues. But a person, each individual, can put an end to samsara, can gain liberation from samsara. And that means the attainment of nibbana. But when one person attains liberation, gains release from samsara, it doesn't mean others are released from samsara. Everybody has to attain their own liberation. Does that make it clear?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Okay, Wiley?
Thank you, Bante. Been considering the three types of dukkha and contemplating them, and tell me if my understanding is coming along correctly. Okay, all beings would have dukkha, even the Buddha. You know, he was sick, he got old.
Yeah, he would have physical suffering.
Okay, and it seems to be reasonable to say that various levels of noble disciples could be free from the parinyama dukkha through insight. But it seems sankhara dukkha, the dukkha inherent to all conditioned experience, would be the type of dukkha that the arahants and the Buddhas are uniquely free from. That would be one of the defining characteristics. That would be what they would be free from, because since they have destroyed ignorance, their volitional formations would not be conditioned by ignorance and craving.
Yeah.
So no conceit of self would develop at the level of namarupa or consciousness.
Yeah.
And with no conceit of self, there'd be nothing to suffer in the moment-to-moment arising and passing away of conditioned things. Does that kind of make sense?
I understand what you're saying. But...
Okay, so and to take it further, since there'd be no conceit of self, and there's nothing, this is very closely connected, not having sankhara dukkha would be closely connected to having no rebirth, because since there's no conceit of self or craving or clinging, there's nothing to be carried to the next iteration of the stream of consciousness.
Okay, but let me just take the main point in your question, and that is whether the Buddha and the Arahats are free from sankhara dukkha. And I would say no, that they are not free from that kind of dukkha. They don't undergo suffering, but they still have the five aggregates. Their being is constituted by the five aggregates, which are constantly arising and passing away. And so they would look upon this arising and passing away of the five aggregates as being, they would see it as being dukkha, unsatisfactory, a defective condition compared to, because they have a point of view outside the five aggregates, from which to look back at the five aggregates and see that they are truly dukkha. That point of view would be the living experience of nibbana, particularly in the meditative attainment, which is called the arahata phala samapatti, the meditative absorption in the fruit of arhatship, in which the mind is immersed in the nirvanic experience. And so from that point of view, when they come out from that, then they will look back, look upon their ordinary experience with the five aggregates arising and passing away, and recognize that as being dukkha, unsatisfactory, but they're not experiencing suffering because of that.
Okay, there is the difference, dukkha without suffering. Okay.
Yeah, it's a recognition, we could say, not a felt experience, but a recognition of the intrinsic nature of conditioned existence or of experience as being unsatisfactory because it's subject to this constant arising and passing away without any inherent core of permanent blissful selfhood within it. Yeah, that's the way I would express it.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay, next is Han Lin.
Thank you, Bhante. I have two questions, all related to this ego, the self. If Buddha stay with the first two knowledge.
Yeah, I think you might be a little too far from your mic. Try to come closer to your microphone.
Yeah, is it okay now?
It's a little better, yeah.
Okay, so my question is related to ego. So if the Buddha stay with the first two knowledge, it is so easy to come with a conclusion. It is this ego, I go from one life to another, right? You see the text, Buddha uses so many I, many times.
Yeah.
So I think one of my question is, earlier today you mentioned about five aggregate.
Yeah.
It's not self. But in the Pali Canon, is Buddha ever claimed there's no self? It is not. This is very different than these are not self versus there is no self.
Yeah, we don't actually find in the Pali Canon the Buddha saying explicitly, there is no self. What the Buddha always says is that the five aggregates are not self. And the five aggregates are not the property of a self. So we shouldn't, there's no ground for us for jumping to the conclusion that because the Buddha says the five aggregates are not self, therefore there is a self within or behind the five aggregates. But the Buddha avoids both types of assertions, either asserting there is a self or there is no self. But what he says is that the five aggregates are not a self and not the belongings or the accessories of a self.
Okay, because in later Buddhism philosophy, this self sometimes manifests in many different ways.
So say again, I didn't catch.
Sorry, what I'm saying, in later Buddhism philosophy,
yeah,
the self sometimes get manifested in the different ways. Sometimes we see it's a true nature. Sometimes we say, big self, or Yeah, so what I'm just trying to go back to the Pali Canon and trying to see any statement. There's really no self.
Yeah, no, we don't find a statement explicitly saying there is no self. And in fact, there's a sutta. This is in the Samyutta Nikaya. It's chapter 43. It could be sutta number 9. 9 or 10, somewhere around there, where a wanderer comes to the Buddha and says, how is it, Venerable Gautama, is there a self? And the Buddha remains silent. And then he says, is there no self? And the Buddha remains silent. And then the wanderer is confused and he walks away. Then later the Buddha explains to Ananda, he says, if I had said that there is a self, that would have been contrary to my teaching that all dhammas, all phenomena are non-self. And if I said that there is no self, then the wanderer would have been confused and would have thought previously I had a self, but now it seems the Venerable Gautama is saying I have no self. So it seems the Buddha didn't say there is no self, because that would just be to present a view, a kind of theoretical position that would be a ground for argumentation. But the Buddha wants to direct his disciples in a practical way, a pragmatic way, to look at the nature of their experience without using the idea, without projecting upon it and imposing upon it the idea of a self. And so the fundamental form of clinging is the clinging to the 5 aggregates as being I and mine. And so the practical way to overcome that clinging is to point out that the aggregates should be seen as not mine, not I, not the self. And that is what removes the clinging.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to give a chance to the other people to ask questions. Okay, now Charlotte.
This afternoon, you said physical suffering gives rise to mental suffering.
It can give rise, not necessarily.
Can give rise.
Yeah.
But you did not say mental suffering can give rise to physical suffering. So that was my question.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, certainly it can work the other way too. Like people who have a lot of, say, stress and anxiety, it can cause physical illnesses. Yeah, so many, many examples could be cited of how mental suffering can cause bodily suffering.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Simon.
Thank you, Bande. My question is about the many passing lives. So what is the clear way to see the many past lives? I remember the sutra talking about is not unimanasikara when we see who in my past life exists or my past life not exist, what is my past life or future life. So you are talking about the first knowledge is about the Buddha sees many of his past lives.
Yeah.
But also there are some the Sutra also saying that it's not the uniso manasikara to see that do I exist or in the past life or not exist in the past life.
I see. Yeah, there's a sutta, I think you're referring to the Sabhasava Sutta, the discourse on all the taints, where he says that the sort of confused worldling will then start to wonder, did I exist in the past? Did I not exist in the past? What was I in the past? How did I exist in the past? When I passed away, what did I become in the past? Yeah, I think in that case, the Buddha is speaking about a confused worldling who doesn't have any kind of meditative powers, and it just gets wrapped up in these doubts and perplexity and theoretical questions about their past existence. But it doesn't mean that the Buddha is rejecting the validity or value of an effort of an accomplished practitioner to recollect one's previous lives. And when the Buddha gives a very comprehensive presentation of the full training culminating in liberation. For example, in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 27 and Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 39, where he goes through the Anupubasika, the gradual sequential training. In those presentations, he'll include, after the meditator or the monk masters the 4 jhanas, then based on the 4th jhana, the monk will go back and recollect his previous lives, just like the Buddha did. 1 life, 2 life, 10 lives, 30 lives, 40 lives, and so on. Yeah, so I think the teaching is directed, because there's this difference in the teaching because of the person that the Buddha is speaking about. In the case of a confused worldling who's overrun by speculation and doubts, don't go back and try to think about one's past lives. But for an accomplished practitioner who has the right view and the foundation of meditative samadhi, then it will be beneficial to recollect the past lives.
Thank you, Bante. Can I have one short follow-up question?
If it's very short.
Yeah. Is that possible the one life passed to the next life is not just 1 to 1, but 1 to many lives?
Can one person be reborn in many forms? Is that the question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've heard among the Tibetan Buddhists that there could be a very eminent Lama from the 19th century. And now in the 20th century, he has like 3 reincarnations, but I don't really understand how that's possible. In the early form of Buddhism, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 proposition.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay, next question is William Wei.
Hi, Bante. Can you explain the 5 aggregate subject to clinging as suffering?
Can I say again?
The 5 aggregates subject to clinging as suffering. Can you explain that?
I dealt with that in the second afternoon session.
Yeah, I missed that because I'm in the other part of the world.
Yeah, then the recording will become available over YouTube. So you have to catch that on YouTube. I can't repeat the entire afternoon session again.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bante.
Okay. Leliata. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly.
Leliati, Bante.
Leliati, okay.
Yes. I just want to clarify my understanding the 3 characteristic, dukkha, anicca, and anatta. Yeah. Am I correct if I'm reflecting anicca and atta? It's actually based for embedded in dukkha. So because based on the Kariya dukkha and Vedana dukkha and Sankara dukkha that Bante explained earlier.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically, because of the atta, self, and impermanence, that's why we cause of the suffering, the first of the noble truth. So if we reflecting on our these basic, am I correct?
I didn't quite catch what the question is.
Yeah, it's
maybe try to state the question clearly and concisely.
In our reflection of the 3 characteristics, dukkha, anicca, and anatta, Am I correct if I'm reflecting that atta it's caused the suffering? That's why it's a dukkha. It also caused a base of the dukkha, and also impermanence. It also caused the suffering. That's my question. So, so when I look at these three characteristics, actually, it's formed in the first noble truth. Is it so about the suffering?
Yeah, though the first noble truth really only deals with the aspect, explicitly only deals with the aspect of dukkha. Though we could say that impermanence is implicit in the first noble truth because we have birth, old age, and death. And we could say that anatta, or non-self, is implicit in the first noble truth when the Buddha speaks about the 5 aggregates. But in the first noble truth, the Buddha doesn't explicitly speak about all 3 characteristics. I hope that I got the question, that I answered the question. And if you want to follow the sequence of the 3 characteristics, the usual way that the Buddha presents it is to go from impermanence to dukkha. So what is impermanent, which means what is subject to arising and passing away, is dukkha in the sense of being unsatisfactory, not being a source of true permanent bliss or happiness. And so then impermanence and dukkha together lead to anatta, to non-self. Since the 5 aggregates are impermanent and unsatisfactory, they are not self, because the idea of the Atman, or self, in the Indian way of thinking, implies something that is permanent and that is forever blissful and secure. So when something turns out to be dukkha and anicca and dukkha, automatically it's anatta, non-self. Okay, we'll have to take, I see 2 more hands, and with that, I'll have to end the question period. So first, Ravi. Ravi?
Bhante, yes. A quick question, Bhante. The 3 characteristics, the third one is anatta. So isn't that the same as no soul? Even though the Buddha didn't specifically say that, didn't imply that there is no permanent self there? Anicca, dukkha, anatta.
Well, the Buddha never says explicitly in the suttas, there is no permanent self. You could draw out whatever implications you want, but if we stick to the actual wording that the Buddha uses, it's always saying this, whether material form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, this is not mine, not I, not myself. So it's always directing us to a particular phenomena that is to be seen as not self. We don't find blanket statements, there is no self.
Yeah, but it's sort of one of the fundamental things, isn't it, Bhante? Anicca, dukkha, and anatta, the 3 characteristics.
Anicca, dukkha, anatta is fundamental, but anatta is not stated in the text, in the canonical text, as the simple negation, there is no self, but rather this or that is not self. Okay, we'll take the last question.
Thank you, Bhante.
And on phone.
Thank you so much, Bhante. Bhante, is samsara, is it wrong if I jump into the conclusion that samsara and nibbana is the same, is two sides of the same coin because they both permanent? And what else is permanent in Buddhism, Bhante?
What is what?
What else is permanent is in Buddhism, Bhante?
What air is permanent?
What else?
Oh, what else is permanent? Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that samsara and nibbana are two sides of the same coin, though samsara is continuous in that it goes on within time, without any beginning and without apparent end. And nibbana is, you could say, permanent in that it is outside of time. But I wouldn't call them two sides of the same coin. But maybe you could say that they're opposites in that samsara is the state of bondage and suffering, whereas nibbana is the state of liberation and liberation and bliss or timeless happiness. Okay, I think with this we'll have to end the question period. And we take a little break, maybe until 8:15, and we'll come back at 8:15 for the concluding meditation and the sharing of the merits. Okay, we can prepare now for the evening meditation session. Well, for us here in the Eastern US, it's evening. For some of you in Australia, it's probably the morning meditation. Okay. Okay, so take your familiar and accustomed meditation sitting position. Back should be straight. Torso firm, but not stiff or rigid. Let the weight of the body be supported by the pelvis and the buttocks against your seat. Hands on the lap, right hand over the left, thumb slightly touching. Or if you prefer, the hands can be put on the knees or thighs. Nose perpendicular to the navel, mouth closed, eyes lightly closed. Chin tucked in a very slight angle. And first settle into the felt sense of the body in the immediate present. Just let the body become soft, relaxed. Then let the mind settle in the region of the heart. Kind of warm, soft, gentle energy in that region. And we're going to begin the loving kindness, taking each of us, taking ourselves as the object. And we can use the phrases I mentioned last night. May I be well, which means healthy of body and mind. May I be happy, truly and deeply happy. May I be safe, safe from all harm, danger, and trouble. And so I'm going to pause for about 5 minutes. In that pause, you use these phrases in whichever way you prefer. One phrase, two phrases, all three of them. Use them to try to generate the feeling expressed by the words, directing the loving kindness towards yourself. And if you like, you could visualize your own image as though you were standing about 5 yards away. Using the phrases the way you would use a spoon to stir a soup. You use the phrases in order to awaken, to generate the feeling of loving kindness in the heart. Okay, continue now in silence, and then we'll be expanding the reach of the loving kindness to wider and wider circles. Okay, now we're going to expand the range of the mind by taking a few dear and close people, close family members, dear friends. But as I said last night, just 3 or 4, not more than that. Bring them into your heart and then generate towards them the wish. May these dear ones be well. May they be truly happy. May they be safe from all harm. Again, work on that on your own in the silence. Okay, now we move to the next level. And now you choose a few people we call mere acquaintances, people that you don't have a close relationship with, but you have a kind of nodding acquaintance. These can be neighbors, colleagues at work, if you're a student, fellow students. So again, just 3 or 4 such people, not more. Bring them into your heart and generate the wish. May these good people be well. May they be truly happy. May they be safe, safe from all harm. Okay, now we're going to expand the range of the mind to the next level. So now you'll take the entire population of the city or town in which you live, whether it's a few hundred thousand, a few thousand people, few 100,000 people, few million people. You take that entire population, bring them all into your heart as though they were your own parents, brothers and sisters, close friends, and generate towards all that population, all those people, the wish for them to be well, happy, and safe. Okay, now we're going to expand the range of the mind still further And now you take into your heart the entire population of the country in which you're living. So bring all of those people into your heart. Again, you can consider that these are all my parents or all my children, all my closest friends, just in different physical forms. So bring them into your heart and generate towards all of them the wish for them to be well, to be truly happy, to be safe from all danger. Recognize that all of these people are just like yourself, that they all want to be well and happy, and they all want their loved ones to be well and happy. And so with these reflections, you can develop a kind of identification with others, even those that you might have some animosity towards, but see that they are just human beings with the same fundamental desires. Okay, now we're going to expand the range of the mind still further to take the entire human population of the earth, people in every continent, every country, every race, ethnicity, religion, all human beings, bring them into the heart and generate the wish. May they, all the people in this world, be well. May they all be truly happy. May they be safe from all dangers. And we can think especially of people in countries which are now experiencing very fierce surge of the coronavirus. Countries like Brazil, India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and now Africa is beginning to experience a surge in coronavirus. So bring all of those people into the heart, people in danger of infection, and generate a strong wish for their health, well-being, happiness, and safety. And now let's extend our loving kindness to the animal population of the earth, taking all the animals, domestic and wild animals, bringing them all into the range of our heart and generating the wish that all of the animals will be well and safe. Well, happy, and safe. And then lastly, we extend the range of the mind to the furthest limits, taking all sentient beings throughout the universe, bringing them all into the heart and generating the wish, may all sentient beings be well, may they all be happy, may they all be safe. Okay, now in the course of this day, through our activities of speaking on Dharma, listening to Dharma, discussing the Dharma, doing the recitations and the practice of meditation, we accumulate a great mass of punya or merit. And now we want to share these merits. And so if you can bring to mind departed loved ones, you can bring them to mind and share the merits with them in your mind, wishing them to rejoice in your activities and in this way to share in the merits. And then also bring to mind the Dhamma protecting devas and the Nagas, the dragon spirits, the Yakshas or Bhutas, the fierce spirits, and share the merits with them. And I'll recite the verse for sharing of the merits. You continue to do this while I'm reciting. Akasata chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Dukkha Pata Chani Dukkha Bhaya Pata Chani Bhaya Soka Pata Chani Soka Hantu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And now we say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Okay, and then we can end with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3.
Bow to Bhante.
Bow to Bhante.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you so much, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
See you tomorrow, Bhante.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank
please
you,
join
Bhante.
tomorrow.
Yes.
You have the time. We start at
6 a.m.
6 a.m. with the chanting and meditation. Okay, so thank you all for
Thank you,
joining. I
Bhante.
wish you all
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you. Have a
Bhante.
good night, Bhante.
Have a good night,
night.
Bhante.
Dom, have a good day. Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Okay, good night.
Bye
Okay,
bye.
good night.
Thank you, Bhante. See
Okay,
you.
good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, good night.
Bhante.